Today, I am rebooting my very popular series of streamer elections, and this time I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about how these streamers get into politics. So, I first want to start off with the 2026 midterms and how each streamer starts to build up their political future 2028 campaigns. We start off with the 2026 Democratic primaries in California for the governorship. Hasan would be the only person to challenge Kamala Harris in this election for the Democratic nominee in the 2026 California governorship race. Now, Kamala Harris is seen as the establishment pick. Millions of dollars are donated to her. Millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars, up to $100 million are donated to her from the establishment. They don't want Hasan to win. Hasan's sort of seen like a Bernie Sanders in this scenario. Now, Atrioc decides to run for the 2026 LA Mayor election as an independent and gets her. And then Asmongold decides to run against Greg Abbott as in the Texas Republican primaries in 2026 to challenge Greg Abbott. For Greg Abbott, I believe he's chasing his fourth term. So, Asmongold's slogan is "No Kings in Texas." This becomes very popular. Atrioc criticizes the current LA mayor on her stance on riots and how she isn't doing enough to stop Trump. And Hasan criticizes Kamala Harris for being part of, quite frankly, a bad administration, the Biden administration, and how she's not going to do anything to make California better. Now, the 2026 election results. Hasan Piker barely loses to Kamala Harris, only by 2%. This comes as a huge shock to the Democratic establishment because Hasan could barely rose, $20 million to Kamala Harris's $90 million campaign, and Hasan came so close to beating Kamala Harris, and it's very clear that if Hasan had the same amount of funding as Kamala, Hasan would have easily won, and this sparks Hasan his hope of winning a future political office. Now, the LA mayor race, Atrioc absolutely destroys Karen Bass in all of the debates. He criticizes her for the curfew, the LA riots, the how she treated the LA wildfires, how she handles the city overall, and he also talks about how dangerous the city is and how filthy the city is and how he's going to change it. So he wins in a landslide by 19%. Then Asmongold is able to beat Greg Abbott. The Texas people hate that Greg Abbott is trying to go for a fourth term, and Asmongold ends up winning by around 4%, 5%. Now we have Asmongold, who would serve as governor for about 1 year before, 2 years before 2028 would come. He would just serve as governor. Here's Atrioc outside of the LA City Hall. But on the same night as he lost the 2026 Democratic midterms or Democratic primaries, Hasan would go out into, this is basically going to be his concession speech, but he would have a Make America Fair Again hat on, and he would announce his run for the 2028 presidency, saying that he was a shock to establishment and that the establishment is scared of him. Now I want to talk about who's all running for POTUS. Here's the main Republican candidates: Asmongold, Ron DeSantis, J.D. Vance, and Ludwig. Now, Ludwig is actually sort of a plant for Asmongold. Ludwig's only job here is to make J.D. Vance look terrible, and in return, Asmongold said that he would pick him to be his VP. And then, of course, we have Ron DeSantis on the side and Asmongold. Here's all the main Republican contenders, and I'm going to go ahead and tell y'all, Asmongold wins this election in a landslide. The Trump administration is sort of seen as no better than Biden's. It's not the best. Trump has like a -6 approval rating by now. And Ludwig does an amazing job by criticizing J.D. Vance any chance he can get. And Asmongold doesn't have to sling any mud because of Ludwig, and is able to kind of look like this guy that doesn't bring down others and only wants to bring up the country. He's sort of seen as a new part of the Republican Party, a new wing of the Republican Party. Now, the Democratic debate stage is filled with a lot more contenders. We have Cory Booker, Atrioc, Hasan, Doug, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, Josh Shapiro, and Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom loses in the first few debates. He's criticized on how he handles California, how he can't stop Trump from sending National Guard in California, how he handles LA wildfires, and he doesn't get much traction in the primaries. AOC gets some traction, but most people rather vote for Hasan. He just seems more likable in the scenario, and is just overall a much funner candidate for the party. Doug does alright. Atrioc comes in second place with 1,343 electoral votes to Hasan Piker's around 1,800 electoral votes. Now, I want to move on to the election. Now, it's time to see who Hasan would pick for his VP, and in this scenario, it's very likely that Hasan would pick AOC as his VP, and as I said, Asmongold planted Ludwig to also run for president, but in return, he would let him be his VP. So now, let's go ahead and get started with the 2028 election. We have Hasan Piker. You know, all these usual safe states. He does get endorsement from Kamala Harris, which really does help him in California, which, he was already going to win. Colorado's likely, and Illinois safe. New York, of course. Now, here's all the Republican safe states, which Texas is safe in this scenario because Asmongold is the governor there. People love him. Even though he hasn't done too much, as long as he doesn't mess up anything, Asmongold should be fine. Oh, did not mean to make Georgia safe. Florida's also safe in this scenario, but Ohio is not. Some Ohioans are kind of salty about J.D. Vance losing the primaries and sort of vote third parties, so Asmongold only gets Ohio by likely. Of course, Hasan gets New Jersey by likely, winning it by around 7%. Minnesota is won by around 7%. And same with New Mexico, won by around 7%. Virginia, too, won by around 7%, this district. Of course, Republicans won this district by a good amount, by around. And now the first thing I want to talk about is Arizona, which I do think Asmongold will be able to win by around 3 to 4%. Arizona has only voted for Democrats one time in the past 40 years, and that was in 2020. And I don't think Trump's going to be as unpopular as he was at the end of 2020. We also have Nevada going to Asmongold and Ludwig by around 2%. And how they win this is they get a ton of funding from lobbyists in Las Vegas. Asmongold promises not to touch sports gambling or any type of gambling during his presidency, so a lot of funding goes to Asmongold and Ludwig. He also wins North Carolina by around 2 to 3%. Republicans always win it. Even in 2020, Trump was still able to win it. Of course, New Hampshire goes to Hasan and AOC by around 5%. Kamala won it by 4%. Biden won it by 7%, so they meet in the middle there. I do think that Hasan could possibly win Pennsylvania. But without Josh Shapiro on the ticket, I think Republicans will be able to take Pennsylvania and Michigan. Of course, Hasan's able to win Wisconsin. And I also have Hasan winning Georgia too, which gives Asmongold the presidency in this scenario. Now, here's what Hasan could do. He could go and try to run for the Senate in California, or he could try to just run for president again in 2032, hoping that Asmongold's presidency is pretty bad. But because Asmongold's seen as this outsider from the Republican Party, he's able to separate himself from the issues that Trump is underwater on, but also still part of the Republican Party, so he's able to claim the victories that Trump has done. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and part 2 will be coming out soon. Thank you all for watching, and peace out.